Trade period is finished. It is now time to have a look at how each team has fared, Ralphie.
That's right. So we'll start with Collingwood. So chips in, not a club that starts to take the first round picks anymore. Dan Houston comes in with the expense of Noble Richards, a second rounder and a future third rounder. Harry Perryman starts as a defender and then potentially moves into the midfield. The question for you guys is, have they traded out of a super draft like Richmond did in 2001? Have they topped up at the wrong time?
Oh, I love this. I think when you add weapons to your football club, you can really make inroads. They're stacked for experience. They're at the top of the tree in terms of what's coming through with Nick Dacos. I think, he's probably their best under 25-year-old. We talk a lot about Nick, but this guy, Dan Houston, is the best ball-in-hand player in the competition in the back half of the ground. He creates scores with his ball use. It's corridor, it's aggressive. He's the best kick in the competition. I think he'll play a different role with Collingwood. I think he'll play with more freedom. That Nick Dacos type role across half-back where...
Just almost sit him off the back of the stoppage and let him...
You don't know where he's playing, do you? Like, he can be in a wing spot, he can be half-back, he can be as a pseudo-midfielder. I think you'll see Craig McRae use this magnet more than what Ken Hinkley did. Different sort of setup, different role. I love it. I think they're right back there again. They're bouncing immediately back into premiership contention.
Well, they were already chips in by re-signing the 9 guys that are going to be 32 years of age and older next year. So they were already chips in to try and win another one. So they've just added some quality. I mean, Dan Houston, we know how good he is. Perryman will fill some roles as well with the loss of Noble. But yeah, they're back in the window. They're back in the mix. They're going to obviously need everything to go right with some durability with some of these older players and some injury. But, you trust Craig McRae, as Kingy touched on, to get the right sort of mix and match with the players that he's got. And he starts maximising the 5 or 6 real high-end talent they have to carry this team next year to another top 4 berth.
I stand with Dan, Ralphie, not Dan Andrews, Dan Houston. He's the one. It'd be more likely to be a statue of Dan Houston in Melbourne than Dan Andrews, but it's a great off-season for Collingwood.
So just quickly on Harry Perryman, though, he's not the Messiah. He's not a naughty boy either, but $900,000 a year for 6 years, 1.1 intercept marks a game, 18 touches, and his kicking, which has been much vaunted, was actually below average this year. Hasn't been a hugely durable player, and so I understand that people would say he's an upside on John Noble, but Noble was a pretty handy player.
Now, he's a depth player, Perryman, and that's not, he's in the best 22 and he'll play a role. He's not going to necessarily be a needle mover.
Depth player for $900,000?
Well, that's the thing. You've got to pay these to get them. And I'm not too worried about how much you pay these players. They all fit in the Surrey cap. It all works. It's like a jigsaw puzzle and you make it work. Some are bigger pieces than others. I think that they've got what they want. All it will do, by having no early picks this year, they've traded out their first pick next year. I know there's talk about McGuan, but their first pick next year still might have got someone before McGuan comes in. It is going to be a big black hole, the under-24s. They're very thin with what they've got in the talent under the age of 24. But I think for Collingwood fans, they'll worry about that down the track. They'll worry about that later. Yeah. I think they're just worried about trying to win another flag.
They're good enough to win it, aren't they, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the
if
discussion.
Everything goes right, they can. Yep. Yeah.
Mid-year, I think we thought that there'd be quite a few of those names, Kingy, retiring, but they've all decided to go on.
You want to tell us who you mentioned mid-year, Sarah?
No, I don't think I've mentioned anyone.
But I think most of us would suggest... So Pendlebury plays on to 2028, let's face it. Yeah. But Howe, side bottom, potentially Mychek, Mason Cox, Mitchell with his foot issues. You could see 5 or 6 of those blokes retiring. Under the relative ratings, only Nick Dacos under 25 is a positive rating there. So look, all of these things could be exceptional. They could be on the brink of a dynasty by this time next year. Or they could be saying, we've traded out our future first. Tom McGuan is a nice player at about pick 30 next year, of course, Mick's son. The cupboard could be dry in that respect. So that's the challenge.
Though. It is a risk. It's a risk, isn't it?
It's hard to get to this point, though,
that's
Joe,
right. That's a risk worth taking. Yeah. Well, that's the decision they've made. So good luck to them, and hopefully they are thereabouts again next year.
Now, can I just recap some more developments as well? So as we told you, Xavier O'Halloran is staying at GWS. Matt Kennedy, the Carlton midfielder, he gets to the Dogs for pick 38. So averaged 24 possessions 2 years ago with 4.6 clearances and then kicked 16 goals this year. Tom Barrass, as we said, to the Hawks for a future first, second and third with a future fourth back. Caleb Daniel, pick 25, gets to the gets to North Melbourne. Luke Parker and Jacob Costanti for pick 44. Bailey Smith gets to the Cats. Brody Kemp stays at Carlton. And the big one, Jake Stringer for pick 53.
All right, we're going to delve a little deeper into Port Adelaide, who, of course, lose Dan Houston in this trade period. Let's head to their GM of football, Chris Davies, been kind enough to join us on Fox Footy. Chris, I'm sure it's been hectic down there, very frantic the last half an hour or so. But from a Port Adelaide point of view, what's the wash-up, do you think, of your trade period?
Look, the last half an hour for us, Sarah, has been more about the party pies, to be honest. We've just been waiting around watching everything else going on. No, look, for us, obviously most of our stuff was done yesterday, and we were contemplating getting involved in some pick swaps earlier on. Didn't quite get there. We'll go to the draft now with 3 pretty good picks, we think. We brought some 2 players in the front half of the ground for us that we need. We need some help there. We need some new players up there. Rory Atkins, obviously, to help with a little bit of depth. But look, overall, we're actually we leave this period of time pleased that we brought some players in. Obviously, we lose Dan Houston. Acknowledge that that's a loss. But the net result is for us to be in a good position from a draft perspective and adding a couple of players into the front end of the ground.
So 13, 29 and 36 CD. So Sydney was a club early on that wanted 13 for picks 19 and 22. Is that something that you're likely to do, or do you feel like 13 is a pick you'd really like to take to the draft?
Look, I think, John, the opportunity exists for us to sit back for the next 3 or 4 weeks and actually look, at what we really want to do. Everyone looks at, the trades that are done as, a finite period of time. There's still, 3 weeks before draft night. I'm sure that there's absolute capacity for us to split that pick further if we want to. But at the same time, everyone keeps telling me that this draft is one that you want to be in at the top end, and having that early pick is not necessarily something that we've had over the last little bit. We're a club who is tasked regularly with performing at a high level and then also doing whatever we can to retool on the run, and I think you've seen the start of that again in the last few days.
Chris, you call it retool on the run. Is this a list that can give Ken Hinkley an opportunity to win a premiership next year, or where do you see this list right now?
Yeah, well, I think that the challenge with that, David, is we're coming from a base of reasonable performance this year. We didn't get where we wanted to go, but at the end of the year we did finish third. We need to add some talent and depth into the front end of the ground. Bringing in Jack Lukosius, who in the same draft as we took Connor Rozee was picked 2. We think he can be a better player with us than he was with Gold Coast. Simple as that. Bringing Joe Richards in as a small forward, a guy who's been starved of opportunity at Collingwood, and an area of the ground as well, that high forward role for us that we haven't had much depth in, and towards the end of the year probably let us down. So we look at those 2 positions as pretty big inclusions. Of course, we lose Dan. We've got some depth at half-back. I think it's more about balancing the list overall. So for us, we want to continue to compete. That's what we keep being told that we want to do, and we think this list has capacity to be better with those 2 players in, and also some young players getting better.
So if you want to call a spade, Gold Coast would have said that Jack Lukosius lacked competitiveness. Now, say what you want about Charlie Dixon, but he scrapped and he clawed over every possession. He's ostensibly replacing him. How does Ken Hinkley get the best out of Jack Lukosius, a very high draft pick?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we're going to have to relook at the way that we actually attack, and having someone in like Jack, and for Charlie not to be there anymore. Charlie is such a big, imposing presence and probably gives our players a little bit of a bailout that they're not going to have next year. What we will have is some really mobile, tall forwards. We'll have Jack Lukosius, we'll have Mitch Georgiadis, we'll have Todd Marshall, Jeremy Finlayson, Ollie Lord. Players that are different to Charlie, and so it will absolutely necessitate us to do something different. And we're open to that challenge. I know our coaches are, and I think that we've got the list and the forward group now, which is going to be better than what it was in 2024.
Chris, there's a lot of discussion outside of your bubble about trading a player of that calibre to another contender, a team that's going to be thereabouts next year, rather than, say, a North Melbourne, which may not have the potential to hurt you, certainly in the short term. Does that come up in discussions at all with you guys in the weeks leading up to trade period?
Oh, look, it came up in the sense of what type of deal we could actually do. I think there was a period of time where we thought maybe, dealing with North Melbourne may have given us a better outcome, but ultimately, we have to play the cards that are dealt, and it was only Collingwood in the end that were able to give us a deal that we were satisfied with. All the talk about Carlton didn't quite end in the way that maybe people thought might happen. So, for us, there are more contenders than just Collingwood, and I think falling into Collingwood alone as the reason why we shouldn't have done the deal was not any part of our thinking in the end. Albeit, I think we would have probably preferred that he didn't go to a team, that was competing with us. But we know that there are actually 17 other teams that are competing with us, and we've got to be better than fixating ourselves on one competitor.
Good point you make. Thanks so much for your time tonight, Chris. We know there's not much rest as you focus in now on the national draft. And there you go. There's the pies. Enjoy one on
Could be
us.
some of your best work, David. That's as well as David's done all year. So well done.
That's why we've got him there. Yes. Thank you very much, Chris. Excellent work from David Zeta there.
He's had a good
Very
off-season.
sharp.
So Rory Atkins is the party pie in this one, isn't he? He's the steak knives of that deal. You look at Dan Houston and you go to a half back there in Rory Atkins. It's as big a downgrade as we've seen in football. So I suppose the question is, have Port Adelaide killed Kenny? You asked that question, it was pointed there. Have you still got a premiership list? I think a lot of people would look at that and say, not quite yet, but the power will say, we have to rebuild on the run. We cannot basically bottom out, and that's why they want to try and turn 13 into potentially 19 and 22 and maybe turn it into a Butters, Rosie, Dersma type of year.
Yeah, but Houston wanted to go, and we've seen if a player wants to leave, most clubs accommodate that, so that's not ideal. He's a dual All-Australian, he's one of the best players in the competition, but I'm not as harsh on Jack Lukosius as some others. I see the upside. I had a look. His last 2 seasons, when he's played forward, he's averaging 1.7 goals and over 1 score assist a game. There's only 15 players in the competition over the last 2 years that have those same sort of numbers. His numbers stack up with Darcy Fogarty and Jamari Ugle-Hagan over the last 2 years in regards to goals and score assists. He's a forward talent. I know some people are frustrated with the way he plays and maybe because of the number 1 draft pick, he's got that tag that makes it, he's always held to a high level. But I think he's going to be a good recruit for Port Adelaide. I think he'll add some class and some inside 50 kicking.
He can't be a good recruit. He's got to be better than good.
He's a future first. He does some stuff that makes you scream in agony, but some stuff that makes you scream in euphoria. Because just like Jake Stringer, he'll win some games for them.
Yeah, he's 24. He's in the peak of his career right now. He has to be better than good to give up.
He'll be better than good. He'll be better than good.
What'll he deliver?
I think he'll surprise everyone with that. He can kick 40-plus goals. He averages almost 2 a game in the last couple of years. Now, if he plays a permanent forward line in a team that, can work around him and want him in there, I think he'll be a real strong addition.
Great coaching challenge for Ken Hinkley, who's regarded as a very nurturing coach and a good development coach, to see if they can get the very best out of Jack Lukosius.
Interesting that Chris Davies said we're going to have to look at the way we maybe move the ball or bring the ball forward of centre. I think that's been the discussion in the pro-season, that bombed entry. Yeah, it didn't work for them in the big games. It hasn't worked for them historically at the pointy end of the season. So maybe with a different system, Jack can be a significant contributor.
Well, they need a system that tailors their personnel. So George Yardes is more of a mid-tall forward. Todd Marshall plays similar to Jack Lukosius. So they're going to have to look at it. They can't just keep bombing it in like they did to Charlie Dixon and think they're going to get different results. So they know they need to mix it up. So it'll be interesting to see what Ken Hinkley can do over the summer.